Hi, I'm Craig Canine from the San Juan Preservation Trust, and here I'm holding a couple of oak leaves that fell sometime last fall from this majestic oak tree behind me. You know, oaks are one of the most noble and revered trees on earth, symbols of steadfast strength and endurance. Here in the San Juan Islands, we have our own adapted oak species. It's called Quercus garryana, also known as the Garry oak. You know, in our conservation work at the Preservation Trust, we talk a lot about Garry oaks. Our volunteers plant hundreds of them every year, and we give them as special gifts, saplings, to some of our most far-sighted donors. But you know, I'll let you in on a little secret. Sometimes I wonder, what's the big deal about Garry oaks? Why are they so important? Come along with me on a journey to find out.
Si nostalgia, jauchs emerson, chagongongelasim, uchietsen, tus eelen, hartga utus bergen.
Hi, Sam.
Hello, Greg. How are you?
It's amazing to see you on Bendovi Island on this beautiful spring day. I have to tell you, my spine is tingling hearing that song and those words you were just saying. Can you tell me what you were singing and talking about, please?
Yeah, I sing that song before I harvest plant medicines and foods such as camas. And the prayer that I said was in the Lekwungen and Samish language. And essentially is what I said was that this here is a prairie, spachen, that's the word for prairie, spachen. And that this used to be a place where our people, our Huilngoch people, would come to gather food and medicine that we would be able to feed ourselves all year long with. And it's actually a living remnant of a garden that was very thoughtfully stewarded by the old ones, by the ancestors for thousands and thousands of years.
So this type of coastal meadow is typical of the Garry oak meadow complex. Is that right?
That's exactly right. There's a few plants that grow together really, really nicely in these prairies, and they all happen to be fire-adapted species as well. And so the management technique that people would use to manage these prairies would actually promote a few key species that people really, really relied on for their winter food sources. Camas, which we call quishal, and the chocolate lily, alik, and then the Garry oak, which is jungilch. And the Garry oak is a really special tree because it's one of the few that would be able to survive these prairie burns that people would do. And it was valued for the acorns. There's a special way to process them, which is pretty labor intensive. But the wood is also such an extremely hard, dense wood that people would use that wood to make tools with, specifically the D adze, which is a carving tool shaped like a uppercase D. That would be the handle that you would then attach a piece of nephrite stone that had been shaped into a blade. And the name jungilch for the Garry oak tree actually translates into D adze tree. So it was really special for that reason.
Huh. Named after the tool that was used to.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I've learned so much. Thanks, Sam. How do you say "see you later" in Quamish?
Haikwicha.
Haikwicha.
That's perfect. Yep.
All right.
And then to say back, I say hayok.
Thanks, Sam. I'm sorry to interrupt this intimate moment, Kathleen, but why are you hugging this tree?
Hey, Craig. Well, you kind of caught me in an awkward moment here. Having a little love fest with one of my favorite trees. This is an Oregon white oak, otherwise known as Garry oak, and I guess I'm hugging it because it's so rare and precious. It's basically considered a keystone species. It's sort of the linchpin in a whole ecosystem. There's not very many of these trees on the landscape, but they have kind of an outsized presence relative to their abundance. There's actually hundreds of plants and animals that associate with these trees and their ecosystems that you don't find elsewhere in, conifer forests or riparian areas.
So tell me about why this is the keystone for so many species. Why do they depend on this tree?
Well, a lot of it's just about structure. As these trees age and the bark gets more furrowed, all of these little cracks can provide roosting habitat for bats. There's actually 9 different species of bats here in the islands that you could find in oak habitat. There's small lizards that will nest in there. Of course, birds will use some of these crevices for storing food. The cavities, these natural cavities that appear as these trees age, this one's getting really old and quite decadent. So limbs are starting to fall off. And when that happens, it creates these natural cavities, which are perfect for cavity nesting species, such as the western bluebird.
What happened once the European American settlers came onto the scene?
Yeah, there was a lot of different things that really created the loss of the oak habitat. One was clearing a lot of the areas where these oaks grew historically, maybe where they were growing in deeper soils, good agricultural soils, and so those areas were cleared for agricultural purposes. Obviously also for housing, and so habitat alteration has been a big factor. In addition to that, the settlers were afraid of fire, and these are trees that adapted in fire regimes. They've got this beautiful thick bark that protected them from the low intensity ground fires that the native peoples would light. And they're very slow growing, and so when the fires stopped, conifers like Douglas fir, which are much quicker growing, were able to flourish, and they grow a lot faster than the oak trees. And so over time, they would basically shade out the oak trees, and the crowns of the oaks would die back. They wouldn't produce as much acorns, and so they just weren't able to regenerate like they used to.
Well, thanks, Kathleen. I feel like I understand a little better now why these trees are so central to the work of the Preservation Trust. I'm going to leave you back to your little intimate moment with the tree. Hi, Tom.
Oh, hi, Craig.
So, is that a Garry oak that you're planting here?
It is.
That is a tiny little tree. Are you telling me that is going to grow up to be a big oak like that one up there?
If conditions are right, it will absolutely grow up to be just like that tree up there.
Huh. So why are you planting a Garry oak here in this particular spot?
Well, one of the things we've been trying to do for the last 10 years is to try to restore this area to the habitat featuring the Garry oak that it used to be. It got taken over by a lot of the conifers out here, and we've since been rolling back the conifers to try to expose more ground for Garry oaks to grow, for the herbaceous plants to grow that are part of the Garry oak system.
So Tom, you've been a forester for all of your career. You've been with the U.S. Forest Service for what, something like 30 years, from Kentucky to Oregon and all the way up to Alaska, and now here in Washington State. So I'm just wondering, from that perspective, how would you rate this Garry oak ecosystem?
It's a really rare habitat, and it's one that over time has gotten decimated for any number of reasons, from development to invasive plants to no more fire being used out here to actually establish this. So yeah, to have this restored makes great sense. It should be what we're doing.
Wow. So I'm just looking at this specimen that you got here, and so the the tree part itself is like just a few inches tall, but this is a long container. What's up with that?
Yeah, this is a characteristic of Garry oaks that's really important for its survival. It grows a really long taproot as part of its initial growth. And the top of the plant outside of the soil could be very small. It may only be a few inches high for 3 to 7 years. And it spends all that time investing in the roots, especially that taproot. And we have to just be patient with these things and let them grow in their time. Because all of a sudden, one year, they'll just start growing. From this little small stage, they'll start growing maybe a foot to 2 feet a year.
So you've got it in the ground, and now what?
So next what we do is we're protecting against voles and against deer. And we need something to actually cover over the seedling, not just above ground, but actually below ground, because the voles can girdle a tree underneath the ground.
So I take it it's translucent enough so sun can get through.
That's exactly right. This actually acts as a little greenhouse.
Ah,
And it allows the plant to grow really well inside there. You just put a stiffener along the side so it's not going to blow over, and now you've got it protected.
well, Tom, I've learned a lot today about how you plant oaks, why you are storing them, and thanks for telling me about the gospel of the Garry oak.
You're welcome.
All right, see you later.
Bye now.
Hey, Dean.
Hey Craig, welcome to Turtleback Mountain.
Why, thank you. What are you up to here?
I was just looking at one of the lichen species on this tree. This is a Usnea lichen. And you know, as these trees mature, they become habitat for all sorts of interesting things, not only these lichens, but a bunch of different types of mosses.
Wow, well, I'm just loving this view of Turtleback, and you can tell from the moss, I guess, and the lichen that there's a whole bunch of Garry oaks lined up into the distance towards the rest of Turtleback. So Dean, as the head of stewardship for the Preservation Trust, what are your concerns about caring for this habitat now and into the future?
Well, that's a great question, because I don't know if you know this, but the oaks in the San Juan Islands and in southern Vancouver Island, they're an isolated little population. The nearest oaks are more than 100 miles away.
Wow.
And they're also at the northern range of oaks. But if the climate changes so that it's more advantageous to oak habitat, we need this population in order to expand into the new areas.
So you're telling me that in some ways at least, a warming climate might actually be beneficial to this kind of habitat?
Absolutely. You know, oak trees are adapted to drier, warmer climates. And as this area gets drier and warmer, there's going to be more places like, you know, the southern facing slope of Turtleback Mountain, which is pretty drought tolerant now. And that's what we're trying to protect here.
Dean, thanks so much for helping me on this journey to learn more about the Garry oak. It's a fascinating tree, but more importantly, it's a precious part of our island ecosystem that we really want to preserve. So I'll leave you now to your lichen, and
Okay.
see you later.
Thanks, Greg. We'll see you.
Yep. Well, I've learned a lot on this journey. One thing it's helped me to realize is how these magnificent fellow beings, many of them hundreds of years old, connect the Coast Salish people's ancestral past to us here today. And with your support, we can continue to carry this connection forward, restoring and protecting magnificent Garry oak ecosystems far into the future. Thank you.